Hi, welcome to a free art lesson. I'm Wilson Bickford. I'm going to show you how to do a nice, easy wet into wet watercolor sky with a big wet wash. That gets a lot of my students into trouble, so I'm going to walk you through this just a step at a time. It's a fairly simple process. I'm using a 2-inch Creative Mark hockey brush, which is goat hair, which is a really nice brush for these big wet into wet washes that hold a ton of water. On my palette, I've got some colors here I'm not going to use actually, because this is from a previous lesson, but I'm going to use ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and a little touch of cadmium red deep. These are the Lucas watercolors. Lucas brand are very pigment rich and nice stuff to work with. So let's get started. I'm going to take a 2-inch hockey brush, like I said, and I'm going to really wet down my sky area. Now, I'm going to just put a reference line here with a pencil just so you see what I'm seeing in my head. I'm thinking there's going to be some sort of a horizon line here, whether it's the edge of a meadow or a tree line or just something. Because obviously you wouldn't just have the whole painting be sky, probably. You could, but we're not doing a skyscape here necessarily. We're going to incorporate this into the landscape. I'm going to wet this very thoroughly, and I'm getting it wetter than I want it because I allow the water to soak into the paper. This is Arch's 140-pound paper, by the way. And it stays wet for a good 3 minutes or so, 2 or 3 minutes, when you really saturate it. Now at this point it is too wet. I don't want it quite that wet, so what I do, it's saturated, drippy wet. So what I do is I take a paper towel and I blot this brush off, dry it right off so it makes it thirsty and absorbent like a sponge, and I go back over that surface and it picks a lot of the excess water off. So it's just kind of not nearly as soppy wet as it was just a moment ago. Now I have to work quickly because I have to get my paint on here within a couple minutes at this point. So what I'm going to do is take some ultramarine blue, maybe a little touch of the burnt sienna, depends on how bright a blue you want in your sky, and I'm simply going to paint in big strokes across there. I'm going to leave some white areas that will look like cloud movements. Even though I've got this big square brush, notice I'm using the corner and I'm turning it at different angles so it doesn't just look like a big square footprint through there. As I come lower on the page, I'm going to take some of the moisture and paint out of the brush to achieve a lighter value. The paper's wet, so all these edges will kind of heal and soften and bleed together a little bit. I want it lighter at the horizon, which has to do with aerial perspective. The sky is usually lighter at the horizon. It makes this area look more distant and far away. If you wanted that a little brighter, you can actually add more blue into that. I'm going to go a little deeper blue with this just so it shows up on camera a little easier. Make sure that you're seeing what I'm seeing here. But you can kind of alter the colors a little bit like that. The idea is to strive for soft edges. Even though I'm leaving these pockets of white, I don't want hard edges in there. So if you put that on while the page is good and wet, those will heal and kind of soften a little bit. And again, I wipe the brush off. See, I'm just using the corner. Any edges that look a little hard, I just kind of touch them a little bit. You can actually rinse the brush right out, squeeze the water out of it, make sure it's dry and just slightly damp, not wet. I can come back in with this, and if I just touch the edges of the blue where the blue and the white meet, you'll see that it leaves a softer edge. I'm actually picking up some of the blue to get a softer edge between the white and the blue. And now see, that's a nice open, breathable looking sky. Also, if you wanted to, the reason I have the red out here on the palette is you can actually take a little bit of the blue. I'm not going to go quite as wet this time. A little drier on the palette. I'm going to take some of the blue, a little touch of the red. Try to get something a little bit more of a purplish or lavender tone, something a little darker, a little different flavor. And I'm controlling the water on the brush by dabbing it off a little bit. And I can put some silhouetted clouds in here. Notice how I'm using just the corner of the brush, and I'm turning at different angles to get an interesting shape. Now this will soften and diffuse as it dries. And notice I'm constantly wiping the brush off because you'll actually pick moisture up off the paper as you do this too. So I come back with a fairly dry brush, and I can just kind of tap those edges and soften those out a little bit. The key is to get all this in here while the page is still damp, and these hard edges will tend to heal themselves and diffuse and soften. Now to put this in the context of a painting, You'd probably have something in here, whether it's going to be a hill or a mountain. Got a loose brush bristle right there. I'll pluck off at the corner of that. See, that's a pretty convincing sky, really, when you get right down to it, for the couple minutes that it takes to put it in there. That's the key. With watercolor, you have to work quickly because you're at the mercy of the wet paper all the time. So you kind of tap that in. And just to put it within the context of what we'd be doing with it, I'll take some of this ultramarine blue. I will take some of this raw sand on my palette, although I didn't use it in the sky, just to get something kind of greenish. Just to give you an idea and a reference to what this would look like. So you'd have a hill or something in here, whatever your land and subject matter might be in this painting, but this would crop the sky out, and you'll see that the minute you do that, it tends to push the sky back and it makes it look better, like it should. So you'd have trees and stuff superimposed here. But see how that kind of pushes the sky back to its rightful spot. So I hope you enjoyed this. That's a good way to do a sky. It's very simple. Get in there while the paint's wet, while the page is wet, I should say, and drop your colors in, let them kind of diffuse and bleed together. I hope you enjoyed this. Check out wilsonbickford.com, and I'll catch you later. Take it easy.